Hello, everyone, or hello, everybody. Welcome to the Idaho Department of Labor's newly established Labor Market Insight webinar series. My name is Craig Schall, and I'm the research supervisor at the department. Today, this Valentine's Day edition is for lovers of data and the vast box of data chocolates that is the U.S. Census Bureau. So a little tie-in with the holiday today. With us, we have Jan Roeser, who is our economist for Idaho Southwestern region, as well as the lead coordinator for the U.S. Census Bureau in the department's role as the state data center. And she will be giving a short overview of census data. But before we turn it over to Jan, let's do some quick housekeeping. Just a reminder, as a notification, this presentation is being recorded and we will upload it to YouTube for later viewing. You'll get an email with a link to the video at the end later on, so you can view it or send it off to colleagues of yours. And at the end, there will be a Q&A for Jan after her presentation. You're welcome to submit any questions you may have in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen on Zoom there. And now we'll give Jan a quick introduction, and then we'll be off to the races here. Jan has been a regional economist for the department since 2007, first starting off representing Idaho's South Central region in Twin Falls. Prior to working for the department, she was a portfolio manager for a Boise investment advisory firm and worked in the international community and economic development while in the Peace Corps. She graduated from Boise State University with a degree in business administration with an emphasis on behavioral management. And with that, Jan, thank you for talking with us today about the census, and it's all yours.
Thank you, Craig, and welcome everyone. I appreciate Lindsay setting this up for us. She's one of our newer additions to our team, so I wanted to do a shout out. I also wanted to say happy Valentine's Day and it reminded me of a little relationship story that I would start in with. Has to do with the minus and the plus sign. One day they were having a discussion and the minus sign asked the positive sign, "Are you sure I'm making a difference in life?" And the positive sign said, "I'm positive." With that, I'm equally positive that there is an array of data out there with the U.S. Census, and it is absolutely applicable to each and every one of you in some way. Unfortunately, I can't do a one-on-one and really delve deep into it. So this broad brush, I hope will maybe expose you to some things that you didn't know were available or allow you access to something that you had tried and maybe hadn't gotten through very well, because there are times that the census information is so vast and so expansive, it can take a while to pull up even, especially 5-10 years ago. It was almost traumatic to go onto the census site in the afternoon when it was so busy. So let's get started. I have a lot to cover and I may have to really pick up my pace at times. I wanted to start with a little bit about the census history. The census history is pretty deep, and it did start after the Revolution with Thomas Jefferson as Secretary of State in 1790. I thought this was interesting. We all love just a little bit of history. We don't like to go too deep, but if we go back even further, ancient history has many examples of censuses that occurred, the plural of census. In the Babylonians, the Romans, the Egyptians, you can go back even into the Bible and have references to people counting people. The decennial census is really important. It's the one that occurs every 10 years. It's really important to each and every state because it does determine how many representatives we have from our state. It was a temporary agency up until 1902 when it was actually given a spot in the Agency of Commerce and Labor. Those agencies later split and it went with Commerce, not with Labor. So we have Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. Census is with Commerce. It changes. It's one of those living books that continually changes. The questions have to change with our society, with our cultural norms. And so questions change, how they're collected change. And one of the most recent changes that has really aided in having data in between those two like 2010 to 2020 was really when it has been the most robust. The American Community Survey started being collected in 2005, but started to be released in between those two decennial censuses, provided a wealth of information, and it also allowed them to have less seasonal employment. They didn't have to ratchet up their employment so much for those decennial census. They took those down to 10 questions. And now we get so much information in between. It's important to know too, it's illegal not to respond to the census. It's written into our legislation that we are to respond. There's a $5,000 fine if we don't. And the same goes with the American Community Survey that impacts about 4 million households, or 4 million people, pardon me, across the nation. They typically don't assess that fine. They typically educate, and they typically follow up. So I have had calls from people that have lived remotely, and they've been kind of tough people living remotely. Some of them have been former correctional guards, and they were really perturbed that the census found them where they lived. So you really have a hard time getting away with not filling it out, but there are about 3%, maybe a little less than 3%, that they feel like they miss at any given time throughout those American Community Surveys and the decennial census. That said, there's also an interesting building that I don't know why this is not, let's see. There's an interesting building that was built in 2007 for the census. Before that, they were housed with the Department of Commerce. It has these twigs all over the front. It almost looks like it's camouflaged. And I did feel privileged to be able to visit it a couple of times. We do have the ability to go for a certain conference they have. And so it was really neat to see this building. It was really neat to go inside. It's in Suitland, Maryland. And it was really neat to go inside and see their, basically their clock that exists on their website, but also it exists inside the building, and it's ticking and showing the net gain of a person every 22 seconds. And they also have the world population showing us on the screen. So that's kind of a neat thing to be able to see if you ever need to on the website. They also have gone to great lengths to make sure that you understand how to access the information. And so after you get off of this webinar, you can jump on theirs and you can go to some of their quick links, which is displayed when you go to census.gov. And you can click on the Learn How to Use Our Data. They have short videos. They don't take a lot of your time, but they are very interesting. And they do touch on the specific programs and surveys that are going on at any given time. So that's quite interesting. The 5 topics that I want to touch on today include the decennial census, the population estimates, the American Community Survey, and how to access those. So they are all in one pocket of information. They all have web pages on the website that you can go to as well. But it's important to know that sometimes when you don't get something for the American Community Survey, it might be that it's not drilled down to that geography. For example, I'm showing you on this screen that the 1-year American Community Survey only covers those populations that are 65,000 and over. So when you use the tool that I'm going to show you to pull up that table, they won't say you don't get to see all 44 counties. They will show you the counties that are 65,000 and larger. And then the 5-year is pretty much for everything. You can see it'll expose all the information on the zip codes, the places, which is another synonym for cities, towns. They'll have the counties, the MSAs, the states, and the nation. The 4th item that I think is really important, and I'd like you to know also that we have profiles for our counties on our website at lmi.idaho.gov. It also shows you the most current commuting patterns that are pulled from LED on the map. We also have on our profiles information from the American Community Survey, usually nuggets that people need real quickly, things like the median household income or the poverty rate or the percent of Hispanic ethnicity for your particular county. Those are some nuggets that we are sure to provide to you on the profiles. And then the last one is the quarterly workforce indicators, which provides information specifically regarding workforce. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but it's a good one. The American Community Survey, the Population Estimates Program, and the Decennial Census are all provided by going to their tool data.census.gov. You can just type it in. I've included the link here for you to see. And you can also see at the bottom, you can type in a table if you're really familiar with tables, if you're an advanced user. And I do know that we have various people on the line that are advanced users, others that haven't gone on the census and don't feel as comfortable. So we have such a broad array of skills here watching, but do know that you can type in that table if you want and get the information you need, or you can go to the advanced search that is circled. It'll take you to the filtering system. At that point, you can search for your topic, but these are the about 11 that are provided, maybe it's 10. But you can also search above that. So if you're looking specifically for the median household income or the median age, you can type that in under the search and it'll pull up that table for you. By clicking on these filters over on the side, you can access the different surveys that are available. You can access the years that you are interested in and the different geographies. And I'll show you how you choose the geographies and the various items too. I want to go to that. Let's see. This is how you choose the geography, and you can see that it goes down to the census tract and the block level. And you click on it and you hit search after you've chosen your topic. I also wanted to give you some background on the tables. They all start with letters, and if you're not very familiar, they do have a rhyme or reason to why they're labeled that way. The S is for subject tables. They go into great detail on a specific subject. The data profiles are something that I will show you in this previous slide. Comparative tables, I think, are awesome. They keep you on the straight and narrow as far as the 5-year American Community Survey. You're not supposed to compare overlapping years. And so these comparative tables that I'll show you on a slide will take, for example, the most recent American Community Survey that's 5-year, has the least margin of error. When you're looking at margins of error, it's a better source than the 1 year, but it does have a little more outdated information. So you have to make a decision regarding your data when it comes to that. But the comparative table will have those data points showing from 2012 to 2016 in comparison to the most recent release, which is 2017 to 2021. And it allows you just to compare back and forth very easily and notice some changes and some trends, which is what this is all about. And the population tables also can be pulled here. And the important thing about the population tables to know is that population estimates are released in between those decennial census. And they're updated every year, and they go back and they update the previous year or two. So when you're looking at vintages, they refer to them as vintages, you will want to get the most recent vintage. And so, for example, 2021 population may be a little different than vintage 2020 when 2020 was first released. So they get more information, they get more sampling, and their model just increases in being more accurate, because these are all estimates, obviously in the title, population estimates. Let's go back a ways here and look at the profiles. So right when you go to advanced search and you type in something, over on the side, there is the ability, let's see right over here, there is the ability to choose profiles. And I don't see it on that page, but you can click on it. And in this particular example, you can see where the educational attainment table is showing. They almost populate things for you to see based on the search topic that you have available. But you can also just click over on the map and you can see a whole array of information. And I'm going to go backwards again. And at the top, you can see that you can choose tables or maps, which is really helpful, especially when we're dealing with a lot of people that have moved to the state. They aren't necessarily familiar with our counties and where they're located in relation to each other. So this is a really helpful tool. The profile provides you with those little blurbs of information that usually are most relevant, very similar to quick facts, which is another item that the census provides you for populations that are larger. Not all of our counties necessarily pull up. Some of them are so small they don't for quick facts. But this is something that provides even more information in a better format. They'll provide the pyramid that shows females on one side, males on the other, and how it's getting a little bottom heavy here with our aging population. I want to pause right now. Lindsay wants me to stay on track as far as, so what? How do businesses use this information? And I would say that if you're doing a report, if you're marketing, if you're wanting to hire and get an idea of where people are coming from, the census is the only spot that will tell you all of that information in rich detail. And certainly knowing what educational attainment our workforce has is really important, especially for companies that are coming to the area and hoping to relocate and know what their training needs are. There's just a lot of information every corner you turn in the census website. This is continuing along, some more information. They put together various tables that you can snip out and include in your reports if you need to. Commuting is one of them. This tells you the median commute time. This is important for our transportation people that are trying to determine bus routes and where the majority of population are coming from. We have all of that commuting patterns available. And this is an example of that comparative table I was telling you that they have for the community survey as far as the 5-year. They release these. And there's 5 or 6 different ones. There's one for housing, there's one for households, there's one for social characteristics. And so going through and looking at this, you can also see just what's going on with childcare and how it's changed over time. This will show you that how many parents are in the labor force that have children under 6 years of age. And you can see that it's increased, which is interesting because we do know we're going into a time when it's harder to find childcare. But in this particular case, if you look at the older children, which are 7, I believe it's 6 to 17. So this is the lower end of it. They show a decrease. And so potentially less parents, maybe they have more children and they're just finding childcare doesn't really work when they have multi-ages through various categories of children. There's all sorts of suppositions and plausible explanations for the data, but depending on how you're using it, that's what you need to seek out and just get an idea of how well it fits with the narrative or the story that you're trying to tell. LED on the map is very easy to use, but it looks a little daunting when you look at it. In this particular case, this is the landing page. When you go to LED on the map, I've included the URL at the top for you to see. And when you go there, you just type in the very first letters of the city or the county or the state that you're hoping to pull up. And they list off your options below. So you could choose Twin Falls County in this case. You could choose Twin Falls City. And then you get to the point where you're choosing the analysis. And in this particular case, you want to choose between home and work. And how they determine that is the home environment is where the workers live. And you can learn the characteristics of those individuals and where they live versus where they work. And that's how they divide up those two things, and you can get different information. Probably the most popular item and what we include on our profile is the inflow and outflow chart. It's shown right here. Shows you what percentage actually live and work in their community. This allows you to see how many people are commuting in, how many people are commuting out. Gives you a broad array of information, very broad. They have 3 different industries, I believe, goods producing, services. They don't break it down a lot, but they do use really good sources of information for this, including tax returns. The census, I don't want to use the word colludes, but they collaborate with a lot of different agencies, and they have massive computers that generate this information. And you can even get a list of what cities are commuting into the designated area that you've chosen, what counties are commuting in. The only thing that's a little hinky about this data is if you have a college town, you will see that some kids are reporting their taxes and living there, but some kids are using not their address at college, they're using their parents. So it looks like people are commuting from a very long distance, which is not always the case. So sometimes there's little holes in the data. This gives you the richer detail, the inflow and the outflow characteristics. You can choose different jobs. You can use, in this particular case, I chose the primary jobs. You can choose all jobs, which include part-time or temporary jobs. And like I said, it breaks it down into earnings. You have 3 different categories of earnings. You have 3 different categories of ages. You have 3 categories of industry, just split up into goods, services, and then trade, transportation, and utilities, which covers a broad number of industries. They also allow you to see, and they allow you to see the concentration of jobs. I want to use my hands, but I better use my mouse. They show you the concentration of jobs in kind of a heat map. In this example for Twin Falls, most of the jobs are here along the river. But what's important about this is if there is some type of emergency, if there's some type of natural disaster, you have a good idea of where these jobs are. And these are used in disaster relief and when FEMA is trying to figure out some of the logistics. We also have the ability to pull up different charts. So if you're presenting, you can pull up charts, line charts, bar charts, and you can snip these out and put them in your presentations. Quarterly workforce indicators is a very rich database of information. You can go down to county level. You can go to 3 to 4 digit industry codes, which is pretty amazing that you can see that at a county level. And you enter the information here, and you also choose your selections here. In this particular case, we are looking at female and male differences in net job changes over time. And so you can see that in this particular case, you can see during certain spike times, males lose their jobs at a greater rate than females do. Let's make sure. I kind of have things in the way a little bit for me to see the legend, and maybe I didn't provide it to you, but it's the darker was the females, the males are the lighter color, and they are together here. The most recent information is 2020, and you can see that they're in trend together, and they're basically having about the same amount of change in jobs. These are all industry. We chose all industry, all ownership codes, but you can really get into a lot of detail here, and you can see that we did it by sex. So here's another one, net change in jobs, the similar thing, net change in jobs by sex, all industry in Idaho. You can do a nice little map. You can see which counties stand out, which counties have had no change in yellow. greater positive change is in the blue. And then you can see all of the counties over here in this table. You just have to move it along. All 44 counties are shown here. And you can see that Ada County has had huge net change in jobs most recently. This is fourth quarter. I think it's 2021. I said 2020 before, but I think they've gotten to fourth quarter 2021. So I think I misspoke. Thanks. To wrap up, and I really didn't go into too much detail on any of these. My hope in conclusion is that you will let me know if you'd like to know a little bit more detail on any of these. I did want to introduce, as I finish up, just some of the latest things that they have going, which includes the household pulse survey that was started in the pandemic, so they could get kind of a heart rate on what was going on with some very pertinent and specific questions. And it does go down to only the top MSAs. So really Idaho is shown in this particular example. You can see that they're looking at the impact of cost of gas on driver behavior. I think this is week 53. So this is their most recent week. And you can see that Idaho, in this case, it has a big impact on us. And the response rate was between, let's say, 59, I guess, 59 to 67. And that's the West drives more than the East. There's a lot more public transportation in the Midwest and the Eastern states. So it does make sense that the cost of gas does impact our behavior. One of the most recent questions that I have had to deal with as the liaison between the Census Bureau and the State Data Center, which is Idaho Department of Labor, is they want to ensure that they have on registry the latest annexations for all the local governments, including counties, cities, even unincorporated areas, which we have fewer than a lot of places, but we do have some. And in fact, the governor is having his capital for a day at Bruno, which is an unincorporated area. It's not an actual place, city or town in Idaho. But they want to ensure they have the proper boundaries identified. And so they go to great lengths. I sent this off to the Association of Cities and Counties because it seemed efficient. Anyway, I'm open for questions. I know this was very brief and broad, but I hope that maybe there's a nugget or two that you guys garnered from this discussion.
Thank you, Jan. So we're at the end of Jan's formal presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel to put them in there, and we'll in the Q&A at the bottom. Sorry, I don't have my video on there. And if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A in the bottom, and we'll kind of ask some questions for her as we go here. One thing that your colleague up north is asking is why does the most U.S. Census data have a 1 to 3 year lag? Where on the website can someone find the most current data?
It has a pretty good lag because they are so comprehensive, and so I'm wondering what they're referring to, which tool they were referring to.
I think in general, like if someone
in general.
What's the most current data set the Census Bureau provides?
I would say their most current is their population estimates that are released. They release their geographies at different times. So the population estimates for 2021 were just released for the state. And then we'll get the counties in March and the cities in June. And that is something that everybody really, really looks forward to. I honestly believe that looking at, let's go to the quarterly workforce indicators. I believe having Q4 2021 is not too bad, quite frankly. Even with our department data, there's a lag because employers have to submit reports. And then the reports possibly are late. Maybe the reports have to be amended, get sent back. We do what we call scrubbing the data, making sure everything looks accurate, based on what they had before. So I'm envisioning that the census has that same task involved. We only have unemployment insurance reports that we pull from for our data, but they have similar time drains, that it takes a long time. And I'm also positive that they are running into some issues similar to all employers, in which people are retiring, people with a lot of continuity with their agency. And so they're filling in blanks, trying to keep people hired, hoping that people will stay. But once again, it's a government entity, so it's not as competitive as private industry can be. So I would say, yeah, I think the QWI, quarterly workforce indicators, is a great update. I don't think Q4 2021 is too bad. Our JOLTS program, I think, is only done through third quarter, or not JOLTS, job to job flows. And I think this is really interesting for employers too. And I didn't touch on it with this particular presentation, but it pulls in the movement of workers into the state and out of the state, and they can be identified by industry. And that information is priceless. I wrote a blog piece on the construction industry and where those construction workers were moving in from, because construction has been our fastest growing industry over the pandemic. And it just seems like people keep pouring in from our surrounding states primarily, but a lot from California and Washington. So it provides a lot of really useful data, and it is outdated, but that's not too uncurrent, in my opinion. It's not a great way to phrase it, but.
Right, and someone's asking a question I had, if you could explain the difference between American Community Survey has two different surveys. It has a 1 and a 5 year. Could you explain the difference between those and what the pros and cons to each are for someone that might be curious which one to use?
I'm so glad you brought that up. So the difference between the two really are who can be included. So the 1 year will only include those population areas that are 65,000 and greater. So if you're using, if you're gathering information for a county that's that large, the 1 year is nice. However, it will always carry a bigger margin of error because it's only 1 year and they don't have the ability to benchmark the information as well as the 5 year. And they can build the trend, and the 5 year is just a much lower margin of error. The information that's provided really isn't that different. It's just that it will be more current with the 1 year. And that's really important in some cases. Like for the state, it's great to be able to see what happened in the last year. And when I do a report for the office or the Commission on Aging, they want to see anyone, they pretty much look at 60 and above, and they want to see it sliced and diced in lots of different areas because they're trying to identify populations at risk, vulnerable populations. And so they're looking at people that are living alone, people that are in poverty, and then also people of certain ethnicity and race. And so once they get those statistics all divided up, they like to make their plan for the year and what they're going to identify as some of the major focuses for their agency. So that's a use that occurs too. But as far as when I go to this, I try to use 5 year just because I do like the lower margins of error. A way to alleviate the margin of error is to take that margin of error, if you want to use the 1 year, and subtract it from the data point on one end and add it to the data point on the other end, and you can come up with a range. And if you're comfortable with a range, go ahead and use that 1 year. It's most current. It doesn't get dragged down by maybe some changes that are occurring most recently. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Jan. The next question, it's related to public transportation. It's the question is with the increased number of workforce working from home, does the data reflect how the inflow, outflow have changed for larger cities in Idaho? And then how would that impact the public transportation system, and if it needs to be adjusted or what needs to happen for that system?
Quite frankly, remote workers are usually they're usually back office workers. Let's call them back office people that do administrative or analytical work, working on a computer, IT. A lot of higher paying jobs that may not use public transportation anyway. People that have to physically go to work usually are maybe front facing staff, hotels, restaurants, breweries, plants, the manufacturing plants. And so those individuals still, with spikes in gas, they would be more likely to use public transportation. So I don't think we need to cut public transportation because we have more remote workers. It's very hard to define remote workers too, because there's such a great mix. There's hybrid. Some people are working 1 or 2 days. Sometimes it fluctuates. My heart goes out to people trying to figure out a good schedule for public transportation, because we all know that there are people that maybe don't have to take the bus, but they want to do it for environmental reasons, but their schedule fluctuates. They don't have to go into the office certain days, but they might determine that they're going to. So they have a really tough job, but this is helpful. And one of these reports shows about 12% remote workers. I don't know if I can find it on one of these reports. I don't know if it might have been, pardon me. I'll look for it and maybe Craig can go on to another question.
Sure.
Start at the beginning.
Maybe we get a live demo of finding data in Census, which is it's always an adventure, really.
Yeah, it really is. And I chose not to do that. Just, transparency here. I could have gone live, but we might have been waiting for a very long time. No, I have one of these printed off that shows some really direct information about remote workers. And here it is. It's on this page. So Ada County profile commuting. This is from the 1-year American Community Survey. So you're looking at 2021, and they're saying 12.1% worked at home. So they do make estimates. They're saying a very small percent of our Ada County population take public transportation, 0.3%. And if you've ridden it, which I have, it's not very full. These buses are not very full. And it's kind of fun to take the bus. You have some great conversations. I really encourage it. But once again, it's not very convenient, and I don't take it all the time either.
Another question is, I think everyone really associates population with census.
Absolutely.
Census, there's multiple population data sets. We talked about ACS and that type of stuff, but just like population estimation and the census. Can you talk about why there's so many different types and kind of which ones to use and when?
I think the gold standard is to always use, of course, the decennial census, because it's counting each and every person. And it's what's used as the base for the next set of population estimates that are what they call intercensal. So starting in fact, we just had the 2020 census. So the intercensal started with 2021, 2022, and they adjust. They adjust based on that 2020 census. So the real gold standard is the population estimates that are released each year. There's a vintage year in between the census, and then the census counts every person. The population estimates and the American Community Survey are strictly a survey with sampling and modeling. So it's more of an estimate than a census would be. This is why our unemployment insurance reports are a gold standard for jobs and payrolls out there is because they're a census as well. They're a count of every covered person, not self-employed, but covered by the unemployment insurance program.
Okay, thank you. If there are any other questions, please feel free to put in Q&A. Just a couple more for her, and then I think we'll probably bring it to an end. One is, do you have a favorite data set at the census that you like to go through a lot?
I'm always pulling up American Community Survey information, mainly because it's so vast. There's thousands of tables. And so if I have some spare time, I'll just like chum for odd data and just see what's really out there, because they typically release, and we typically highlight in our news releases, the most commonly used information, the most commonly sought after information. So things like, for example, population estimates usually tell you when they are released what comprises the growth. So is it comprised from natural change, deaths outweighing births, or is it from in-migration from other states and international? And that's really fascinating to me. But then the American Community Survey goes one step further and breaks down the migration flows and who's coming in and what age groups and what characteristics they have as far as race and ethnicity. And so it's just really fascinating to dig into it. Unfortunately, we don't always have enough time to spend that time just kind of fishing around for information. But that's between the American Community Survey and then applying the population estimates. That's my favorite.
And at the beginning, we kind of mentioned that the Department of Labor is the state data center for Idaho for the U.S. Census. Could you talk a little bit about that, what that entails, and why that's important?
We just like to make sure, they like to make sure, the U.S. Census likes to make sure that everybody understands what's being released. And so there's always a lot of information that is shared between states. They have meetings on a quarterly basis. And they also have a list of when pertinent information, especially some of the big items, are going to be released. With the pandemic, the 2020 census was released late, and a lot of the information still isn't released. It was such an undertaking to try to follow up with everybody. And they have really huge quality checks too, in which they go back. Some people are picked for a quality control, and they might be contacted 4 times by the American Community Survey folks just to ensure that the answer is the same as the first time they gave it. And how irritating would that be? Quite frankly, if you're contacted 4 times for the same information, they don't do it to very many people. I think it's maybe 10% of the American Community Survey participants are going through that rigorous follow-up. But those are some of the little nuggets of information they share with us. They also have us submit on an annual basis how much information that the census releases in all of these tools and all of these surveys, which I haven't even scratched the surface on, how much we use it. And so they try to quantify that. They try to see how many hits on our website we get for our census page, which we do have one page on our website, our labor market information, lmi.idaho.gov website. They like to know how many clicks you get on that. They like to know how many articles are written, how many press releases we send out. They combine all that, and I'm sure they present it to Congress and to the senators when the time comes that they are asking for their budget, just like we all do as an agency. I think being involved as the State Data Center is interesting because you do have firsthand information. They allow you a time period where you can go in early and look at the information before it's actually released. And certainly it's embargoed. You can't talk about it, but you have an idea of what's coming up. And so you can kind of write your release so that it's more indicative of what's happening. You have time and prep to do that. So that's kind of the data center role.
Great. Thank you, Jan. One final question for the audience is if you've had any experience using the public use micro data sample, the PUMS of the ACS, and trying to estimate quantities that aren't produced or available in census tables.
Yeah, so the PUMS data is interesting because it doesn't have anything to do with political boundaries. It groups populations of approximately 100,000 together, and I can't exactly explain why this is important, because I do think it is just another way of looking at the data. It's another way of slicing it, perhaps. Political boundaries are all good and well, but maybe they're saying, yeah, there's bigger groups of people that have some of the same and similar reactions, and we want to put those together and group them. And you can see that in Ada County. We have different groups of people with like thinking, maybe living in different parts of the county. Same with Idaho. Different regions have different characteristics. And so they've done that in hundreds of thousands as far as population goes. And they break it down just the same for the American Community Survey. You can see all of those things. And you can also click on a button and you can see what they're pulling together. They'll show you the boundaries, the shape of that 100,000 that they pulled together. I'm trying to remember how many are in Idaho. I don't have that figure off the top of my hand, but I'm guessing just dividing it, we probably have about 20, something like that.
Well, there isn't a question. There was just someone that expressed gratitude for your presentation and thought it was very helpful, and they look forward to the slides and the recording later. So,
oh, good.
Are there any concluding remarks you'd like to make on the census before we wrap this up?
Well, I would like to say, if there's something in depth that you'd like to go over, if you think I have if somehow you think I have been exposed to it, and I will say I'm not an employee of the Census Bureau, so I don't know it in and out. Like, I feel like I know our data here at Department of Labor much better, but I have delved into a lot of it. And so if there's ever a time you need something, or if you ever want to go over something, we could do it on this type of platform. But then we could go live, because it's okay if we're just having a conversation and there's dead time while the census pulls up something. But there's a lot to be had out there. There's a lot of great potential to unleash in the data if we all just delve into it. And I'm sure there's something that's of interest to each and every one of you. So thank you for listening to this.
Thank you, Jen. With that, that brings us to the end of our webinar. We thank you for attending. We already have our next webinar on scheduled. We'll be sending out an invite for that here in the next few days. It'll be on March 14th. And our economist in southeastern Idaho, Matt Paskash, will talk about some of his analysis that he's done on the housing starts in the state. So please join us for that, and we look forward to that discussion. And before we go, I'd just like to remind you that the Idaho Department of Labor has many services to assist employers and job seekers, and that includes access to labor market information. The information is free and available at lmi.idaho.gov. And there you can find the page that Jan referenced in terms of census data that we have, and also links to census data, as well as a directory to our economists, and you can find the one that's closest to you. If you have any questions or want to know more about labor market information, or any other questions you may have that they might field for you. Thanks again for attending. Have a great day, and hopefully it's spring weather the next time we talk. So happy Valentine's Day, everybody.